Hello and welcome to the Game Theory Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Vicini. We are presented by CLNS Media. Today on the show, we've got good friend of the program, Cole Zwicker, on to talk about Trae Young. That has been the topic in college basketball. It's been the topic in NBA draft circles throughout the entire course of this month, where Oklahoma has fallen on hard times. They've lost, I believe, 6 in a row, 7 of 8, and 9 of 11. How much of that falls on Trae? How much of it doesn't? What do we think of Trae Young as a draft prospect now that he's finally going through a bout of adversity? We're going to talk about all that much of the same way we deep dove on Marvin Bagley earlier this year. Well, we're going to talk a little bit about the NBA as well at the top. But Cole, how's it going, man?
It's all right. It's still a bittersweet after that Trae Young Kansas experience. I was thinking about just going into the fetal position until June and coming out of like my cave.
Well, like, the takes are flying, man. The takes are
they're
coming hot and heavy.
Oh, volume, score. I mean, obviously the hair stuff was already existing before, but just a bunch of this guy was overrated the whole time. He's just another, I don't know. Insert your expletive comparison of guys that haven't made it in the league that are undersized point guards that struggle with efficiency, and that's basically what we've had so far.
Yeah, it's going to keep happening over the next little while here, and it's going to be hard to avoid, especially given that we have over 4 months until the NBA draft. I just got so sad saying that.
Yeah, I'm out of here.
See you guys. Good podcast. Bye. No, but before we get into the Trae Young talk, I want to touch real quick on the Dallas Mavericks story. I feel like you can't avoid it because it really is definitely the most important story in sports right now. For those who did not see it, Sports Illustrated, Jessica Luther and John Wertheim did a expose on a culture of corporate, essentially misogyny and sexual harassment, and in one case, outright domestic violence that was pervasive within the Mavericks organization. It's a really, really shitty story to read, but it's also a very important story to read, I think. Now, I mean, on some level, I think that I understand, as Cole does, that we don't necessarily have like this incredible perspective to have, right? We're two white dudes who, you know, I work from home and don't really have a whole lot of, you know, workplace experience. Cole, you know, is a lawyer. You have some workplace experience, correct?
Yes.
So, I mean, look, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that, you know, we're not going to say this is terrible. This is absolutely awful. It's atrocious. This stuff needs to be fixed. And we need to do better about the way we treat women in the workplace, unquestionably. Having seen the way that, you know, some sports reporters look down on women whenever they're in media scrums and whenever they ask questions to players in media scrums, it's really shitty the way that they get treated. And I can only imagine what it's like in these corporate macho-infused environments, such as the one that the Mavericks certainly have within their corporate front office. So I just kind of wanted to give it a chance, or give Cole a chance and give myself a chance to just kind of talk real briefly about it and just say, you know, hey, this is terrible, right?
Yeah, I mean, I've only gone through the cursory facts. I really want to sit down and read the article at length. I think it deserves that, and I want to give that the proper respect. I don't want to seem not sensitive so far. I mean, from not reading the intricate facts and stuff like that, I'm definitely going to go through and do that. But just overall, my takeaway is I just hope this kind of brings to the surface and serves as a lightning rod if this is happening in other facets of the league. I hope this, I mean, I obviously don't hope that it's happened to people, but if this is something that unearths other episodes like this, that's probably in the long run a good thing. Of course, what you noted about women in the workplace, especially in the sports industry, we've seen that kind of approach towards taking women seriously, all of that. That's something that I take really seriously as far as viewing everybody on their merit, not based on any kind of anything outside of just the indication of you know what you're talking about. So I'm pretty steadfast about that. And obviously it's occurred through history, recent history. So if this is the episode and this is the circumstance that can hopefully allow us to be more accountable overall as individuals, this sounds super soapboxy, but overall, that's just kind of what I get at is I hope that this is for the better because it's a bad situation.
Yeah, we really do need to keep individuals at the highest level more accountable. And I always applaud Jessica Luther, particularly for that, the author of this story. She has done such a tremendous job over the course of ever since I've been in this industry, at least. So going on 6 years plus of holding men accountable for being awful to women in the workplace, be it via harassment, assault, etc. And, you know, the biggest thing here is that we really need Dallas to be held accountable here, because some of the excuses that have already been laid out, for instance, by Mark Cuban, like on why he didn't fire Earl Snead, who was, you know, twice shown to have assaulted women physically. So the second time came around, the way I looked at it was, and again, in hindsight, it was a mistake, but I didn't want to fire him because then he would go out there and get hired again and do it somewhere else. That's what I was truly afraid of. And that's what the discussion was we had internally. It was a choice between just firing him and making sure that we had control over him. So I made the decision. It was my decision. And again, in hindsight, I would probably do it differently. I made the decision that we would make him go to domestic abuse counseling as a requirement to continued employment, and that he was not to be alone without a chaperone in the presence of any other women in the organization or any other women in a business setting at all. If you have to hold someone away from being one-on-one with a woman in your corporate work environment, that person should not be working for you. Full stop. That person should not be under your employ, and you should not be paying him actual money to work for your team. That's just it. Seriously. That's a simple response.
Yeah, it doesn't get any simpler than that. I mean, you label the guy what he is. You don't have to make excuses about, I would have done something differently. This is not a hard decision to make. I mean, I'm not Mark Cuban. I'm not going to profess to know the circumstance he was in. But if you have someone who you are legitimately stating up front that you are concerned about his interactions with women, this isn't that complicated as far as just the overall point of it. If somebody's interacting like this, you have to black label them, and they're out of the league. I mean, that has to be the way society works, is that you have to be accountable, label somebody for what they are. Even if it's tough for your image, you have to go a step beyond and think about, you know, other people. And that's kind of what we see here.
Yeah. So anyway, let's get into the Trae Young stuff. And, you know, as I talked about with Zach earlier, awkward transition time. But, you know, at the same token, it's never going to be an easy transition into talking about something as trivial as draft prospects whenever we're getting into, issues as important and valuable as sexual assault and sexual harassment. Maybe an easier way to do this is just by saying that, you know, hey, Michael Thompson, Clay's dad, tweeted earlier today, according to Bleacher Report, based on NBA metrics, get this, Kevin freaking Durant is the 10th best player in the world. Ha 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 ha. And that's why we don't use the metric system in the NBA or in America.
All right, I quit officially. That's it. That's the last straw.
That's why we don't use the metric system. Good God, Michael.
My God.
I mean, come on. And then the second one, let's just stick to yards, feet, and inches over here. No metric system. Not after that stupid Bleacher Report.
We should have a podcast where we just call a bunch of people out. I'm up for that. That sounds like something that would make me feel better.
What are we doing here? All right, so let's talk about Trae Young. Trae Young is really good at basketball. That much is clear. Where do you have Trae Young on your board? Because this is going to, I think, kind of be the opposite of the Marvin Bagley discussion, where you're going to be the one who is positive on him, and I'm going to be the one who kind of brings up his negative aspects a little bit more.
For sure. So I think right now I have him number 3 behind Luka and Jaren Jackson. I had him at 2, but I think with recent events and just how Jackson's played, Jackson's a little safer, so I moved him ahead. But in my tier, I have 2 through 5 tied. But if I was forced to choose, I would take Trae still over Michael Porter and over DeAndre Ayton. But they're kind of all on the same level for me in that second tier.
You would take Trae Young over DeAndre Ayton?
I would, if I was forced to. I mean, like I said, I think they're the same level as far as the tier goes. But if you made me make a decision, I would take Trae Young.
Okay. So I have Trae Young at number 7 on my board. He's kind of in a tier for me with Colin Sexton, Mikal Bridges, and Miles Bridges and Wendell Carter, I would say. Just slightly lower than where you have him. It's hard one thing that we can start with is where Trae Young is kind of coming from before this year, right? I think that trajectories are always incredibly important to discuss whenever discussing NBA draft prospects.
Sure.
So coming into this year, it's well known now that Trae Young was obviously not necessarily a top 20 recruit in the country. He was the guy that when you would ask recruits, who do you think we're underrating? People would always say Trae Young, and that came to fruition early in the year, right? He was incredible during the early portion of the college basketball season.
Yep.
Trae Young, throughout the course of his high school career, was typically something around a 36% three-point shooter, in large part because he would take really bad shots, but he was also a good distributor, as he's shown this year as well. He was someone who got his teammates involved. He really liked to, pass the ball and make sure that he was getting out on the break and getting them involved that way. He just also wasn't as nuclear a shooter as we'd seen so far. And additionally, he played on an AAU team with Michael Porter, Mocan Elite, where Porter was pretty much always considered to be the better player. There were certainly games where Trae Young would show out and he would be the better player, but over the course of their AAU careers, Michael Porter was largely considered to be the higher level prospect by a not insubstantial margin. So I guess that where we have to start then after that is what happened early this year. Early this season, I'll let you kind of jump into what you saw because he was unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, right out of the gate, we saw the skill level, all the IQ stuff just manifest on the court. You're like, who the hell is this guy? I think the first play I saw of him was on a lower level game, and he split a pick and roll and then crossed over a third guy immediately. And you're like, who the hell is this guy? Because I hadn't seen him a lot of him at the high school level. And then his shooting, he was just supernova, these deep pull-up threes. We knew he could do that, but just seeing it on the college level is just a little bit different. You're just like, for one, he has the audacity to shoot them from 30 feet. And two, it's just like the transition. We've talked about this before. The transition from his pull-up to from his handle to his pull-up is just phenomenal. You just don't see a lot of guys that can do that. And all the passing stuff really just jumped out to me. I think he's a phenomenal passer. So that's how it started the season. It was like, obviously he was undersold as a prospect. He wasn't considered a top 20 guy. And you watched him play and you're like, why the hell is Trae Young behind Colin Sexton when Trae Young's literally better at everything offensively than Colin Sexton is. So that's where we started. And then obviously that the conference play started, defenses started to acclimate to him. And then we see the recent product of the last 6 games where he's really struggled.
Yeah. So let's kind of just get into a deep dive on what we see from Trae Young. So Trae Young, as you mentioned, his ball pickup off the dribble when shooting is absolutely freaking remarkable. You look at the numbers here. I believe that among Division I players, he has scored more than all but 4 or 5. So he's 6th right now in points on jump shots off the dribble this year. His points per possession in those situations is 3rd among those 6 players. So incredible jump shooter off the dribble, 53.8 effective field goal percentage. That's just ridiculous. It's insane. He's in the 90th percentile overall in terms of efficiency. And on that kind of volume, it's totally remarkable that he is where he is right now. Balance is another key with Trae Young that kind of permeates his game, right? He is incredibly balanced when pulling up off of the dribble because he can just kind of pull up from any position. If he's going right, he's balanced enough to pick up the ball, get it right into the shooting pocket, and shoot either a fadeaway or a straight-on up and down jump shot. Going to his left, same deal. He's really good at picking up the ball, getting it back to his right hand, putting it in the shooting pocket, and going up for a jump shot. Balance also is important whenever you talk about his ability to gain separation, because he has an incredible change of pace and change of direction dribble that you can only have whenever you're an incredibly fluid athlete who can also keep himself on balance when going right to left and stopping and starting. That's a big part of the reason that despite the lack of quote-unquote traditional athleticism, he has been able to find open shots as easily as he has, or find relatively non-contested shots as easily as he has. Balance is such an incredibly important aspect of draft evaluation that I think is so often undervalued, that I think Trae Young is going to be an interesting test case for seeing how important it is for NBA draft prospects to have that kind of balance. And the last place that I want to point out that balance is in his floater game. A lot of players, it's really hard for them to have successful and consistent floaters because, they'll either be leaning or they'll be, struggling to get the ball in your one hand and struggling to get it, perfectly centered on the one hand. Trae Young is probably the best floater shooter in the country, right? He is hitting 50% of his floaters right now. That's a remarkably high number. It's really hard to do that, especially over the course of an NBA season. I think it's going to be hard for him to do that. But it's worth noting how important balance is within that. So where do you want to jump to next within his game, Cole?
Let's go to his passing. I just think that is, honestly, it's his best skill. I mean, his shooting is his most important skill, just with the NBA and projecting his shot. Like, the threat of his shot is the most important part of his game, I think, just because you have to play up on him. We've seen how effective he can be when you have to press up against like Javon Carter, who can really get in his airspace and take away his shot. He can still blow by guys like that. He needs that shot, so it's the most important. But the passing, for me, I think he's a special passer. We've talked about this.
Really?
Yes, I think he's a special passer. Absolutely.
I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just honestly a little bit surprised just because I've never heard someone say that Trae Young's best skill is not his jump shot.
Yeah, I think that goes to the distinguishing between what somebody's best skill is and what somebody's most important skill is. Like, his jump shot is probably his most important skill at the next level, but his passing, I really do feel like he's a special passer. I mean, we see the anticipation. He can really see one pass ahead. The hit-aheads that Lonzo got so much credit for last year, Trae does that stuff too. Yep. And he just doesn't get the same amount of credit because I think what the narrative is what you noted. Everybody wants to fixate on the jump shot, on the volume scoring, all of that, but when you piecemeal it back and you see the separate element of his game where even in recent games where he hasn't been effective as a shooter, he's still been incredibly effective as a passer because he's so crafty. We see the left-hand passes, the right-hand passes. He can shoot a skip pass with either hand across the entire length of the court in pick and roll. You just don't see that from guys his size. And of course he suffers a little bit with the lack of strength. Sometimes they don't get there, but you see all the wraparound passes, all of this stuff that he can just anticipate. He has that next level intellect that we don't see a lot of point guards have.
Yeah, and you bring up the left-handed and right-handed ability. That ambidexterity, I think, is incredibly important, right? The fact that he can make passes with either hand gives him, twice as many angles as some other passers have. He can hit that wraparound pass with the left hand from underneath the basket all the way over to the corner. That's a really hard pass to make for a lot of players, not only from a vision standpoint, but just from, again, like a balance standpoint. You have to be so on balance within, your core and making sure that you can get your entire body into that pass that it's really difficult to actually be able to physically make that pass. He does that really, really well. You also mentioned the idea of the hit-aheads and comparing him to Lonzo Ball. I mean, again, I agree with you. The narrative on Trae Young is that he's a shooter, and the narrative on Lonzo Ball is that, he just did everything that a team needed him to do to win because, he was this unselfish player who would do whatever it took. I mean, here's the deal. Like, Trae Young is kind of like that too, especially out on the break. Like, it's just that Trae Young has a tighter handle and can maneuver in and out of spaces, right?
Exactly. I mean, the handling is a huge point of emphasis here. He's really shifty with his dribble. He can play in pick and roll, handle in tighter spaces, and that gives him a self-gravity that a lot of guys like Lonzo don't have because he generates so much effect just by dribbling the ball and being a shooting threat that it increases his passing angle. So if we look at him at the next level, guys have to chase over the top of pick and roll. He's going to have better passing avenues, better lanes, because it's going to be better spaced. And you see what a guy like him can do with his vision. His drive and kick vision to me is pretty special. You don't see a lot of point guards that can really drive and anticipate, throw cross-court passes, that can survey the floor, have that spatial awareness. So when I say it's his best skill, I mean like it's his best trait. I'm not sure if it's his most valuable. I still think that's the shot, because without the shot, we've seen point guards in the modern game, if you can't hit pull-ups, that impacts your ceiling so much as what you can provide, especially when you're a non-elite athlete like Trae. But the handle, all the skill stuff with him, for the most part, is there. Do you disagree with any of that?
Yeah, no, I think it's all there from a handle perspective, all there from, as we mentioned, a balance perspective, a vision perspective, a basketball IQ perspective. I will say that sometimes with the passing, he goes overboard. He really needs to cut that back sometimes. We'll talk about that whenever we talk about the more negative aspects of his game. Whenever I evaluate lead guards now, this is kind of how I run through things, right? My most important skill for a lead guard that he has to be able to do is he has to be able to get separation consistently. That is, to me, the most important thing that a point guard has to be able to do. Be it via change of pace, be it by pure athleticism like Russell Westbrook does it, be it by change of direction with a right to left crossover. However you do it, if you combine all those things, that's even better. But you have to be able to get separation first. The second part of it is being able to knock down jump shots off the dribble. We see the way that that puts pressure on defenses now. Russell Westbrook didn't become Russell Westbrook until he could pull up from 16 feet and have that shot be a consistent part of his arsenal. Same with even John Wall, this nuclear, unbelievable athlete in terms of quickness, didn't morph into an all-NBA caliber player until he could actually knock down that elbow jumper that he's become synonymous with. The third aspect that I look for is now passing. And I know that kind of runs antithetical to the way that we've thought about basketball in the past. But it's just so important for point guards now to be able to knock down shots and to be able to get separation. The rest of it, I think in terms of passing, there's already just a level that most guards are at in terms of passing the ball that you don't really have to worry about it. Like even Damian Lillard, who's not a totally natural distributor, he finds ways to do it. CJ McCollum is another guy, not necessarily a natural distributor. He just finds ways to be successful. And that's not to say that you can't be a pass first point guard in the NBA. I just think it's harder to do it. And I think that those guys are inherently slightly less valuable nowadays, given the way that the game has changed, given the way that the hand check rules have gone away or have, gone into place actually, I guess, given the way that you can no longer hand check that way. It's just so valuable. And then the fourth aspect I look at is defense. Can you defend your position? Can you make people uncomfortable at the point of attack? Can you do all of those things? That's kind of the run through I go through with point guard prospects. Do you do something similar, Cole?
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, almost in the same step. Maybe not creating separation first. I think I look more to can you score the ball, and that's what you're getting at. As far as point guards in the modern game, they have to have self-gravity as scorers. If you can't score, I don't know how you really handle the ball in a primary fashion from what the game's become with so much pick and roll. It's a tough sell, like a Ricky Rubio type. It's really hard to have a point guard like that who can't shoot off the dribble and who can't finish at the rim. If you don't have no mechanism to score, you're just very predictable, and that impacts scheme and all of that. But then building off of that, I do think passing, I agree with you. I think that there is a threshold of passing that a lot of guys will be successful enough at the NBA space. You can make simple reads and pick and roll. A lot of things aren't that complex, but there is definitely a difference between guys who pass well and guys who can anticipate and are high-level passers and high-level thinkers. You can manipulate the defense, especially for the guys that aren't those high-level athletes. But as far as the framework goes, we've always talked about the importance of shooting off the dribble. It kind of starts there for me because then you can kind of see how a player needs to respond to certain schemes. Like if you can't shoot, you better be a hell of an athlete. You better be a Derrick Rose, John Wall guy who can get to the rim. I know John Wall developed a jump shot, but guys, nuclear athletes like that, you can get away with it. But if you can't shoot the ball, that just really limits what you can do as far as affecting and dictating scheme at the next level.
So here's the crazy thing. If you go through the guys that are averaging the most assists in the NBA right now, Russell Westbrook, I would say he's still probably a score-first guard, wouldn't you?
Oh, for sure.
James Harden, still a score-first guard. LeBron James is, more, I would say even, but he is at his best when he's aggressive looking to score. Ben Simmons, what would you call Ben Simmons?
Man, he's definitely more of a pass first, but he can still score just because he's so damn big when he gets going downhill. He has a kind of a niche advantage because he's 6'10", kind of like a Giannis type. He doesn't have to shoot. He can just get to the rim.
Draymond Green, not really applicable here because he's not a lead. Rajon Rondo, definitely a pass-first guard, but I think that there's limited value to what Rondo brings to you as a team. Jeff Teague, what would you call Jeff Teague?
I think you still have to call him a volume driving point guard as far as scoring first. He's a decent, okay passer, but I think he's definitely more scoring.
Spencer Dinwiddie.
More scoring.
Damian Lillard.
Definitely more scoring.
Steph.
Scoring.
Kyle Lowry.
Yep, same.
Those are your top 10 guys in assists per game right now. It shows you how even the guys that are great passers now, you have to bring the scoring to the table. You just have to. Otherwise, it's really difficult for you to be able to be a successful point guard in this league. I mean, like Elfrid Payton, I would say is, he's 12th right now in the NBA in assists per game at 6.4. He is still a guy that will look to score the basketball. Now, he's a driver first and can't really shoot, but he likes to drive the ball and try and get into the lane and score.
Yeah, you have to have some mechanism to score at the NBA level if you're a primary. I mean, really overall on the floor now, from any position, you have to have some kind of input offensively, some value. But for primary ball handlers, that usually comes in the form of off-the-dribble shooting or getting to the rim at a high rate and finishing well. So
back to Trae Young. The fact that he's a scoring guard first and a good distributor second, I think is fine. That will be a good combination for him in the NBA. To kind of run through my checklist basically that I look at when I look at point guards, right?
Sure.
I am a little bit worried about the lack of separation. I'm not super worried. I think he can get separation, and I think that he probably needs a little bit less separation than other players because his release is so quick off the dribble. But I am a little bit worried about that, despite the way that I, effusively praised the way that he's balanced and can change pace and can change direction, because he's just not overly long. He's not overly quick, and sometimes those guys do get eaten up.
It's a fair concern, especially if you get him in an isolation situation where he doesn't have the advantage of running his guy into the screen and then taking a big in space in a drop back coverage, or if the big gets out, giving him an in and out dribble. I don't think he's not like one of the lead guards from last class, like a Darren Fox or Dennis Smith as far as athleticism. That's clearly the case. He doesn't have that kind of burst, but he does change speeds really well. I think his first step is a little underrated. His top end speed is not there, but I think he'll be able to get enough separation. You look at the point guard defenders in the league right now. How many great point guard defenders are there? It's not like he's going up against Chris Paul every night. So, especially with how lax defense gets, I know at the highest levels that upticks, and you get like someone like Stephen Curry, who's a good defender when he's engaged. At times, he's going to struggle with separation. He's not just somebody who can create space on a whim, but he does have the threat of a shot. Again, we've seen that. I have not been worried about him creating and getting by guys this year. Every time he's had a challenge and he has some kind of energy left, he's not like totally fatigued. Like, he blew by Javon Carter numerous times in that game just because his gravity as a shooter opens up those lanes like it won't for a lot of guys. Even the rookie class this year with point guards, you see guys like De'Aaron Fox, Dennis Smith. Nobody cares if they shoot. They just duck under screens even because they haven't established themselves yet. So Trae is going to have that gravity, I think, from day one, and that's only going to help him. I think that's actually a more important skill in many respects than just raw burst, because if you can just play off a guy, you're going to limit him regardless in the NBA these days. So you will not be able to do that with Trae.
Yeah, no, and I totally do agree with that. One thing, though, that scares me in terms of his ability to gain separation is a lack of physical strength. I am worried that someone like Russell Westbrook is just going to bully him. They're just going to, kind of out physically just overpower him from time to time. And I know that you can't hand check anymore, but you can still just get your body in front of someone and have them run into it. And I don't know that Trae has the strength to withstand a lot of that.
And that's absolutely fair. I think that a guy like Westbrook, if you just have that much of a physical advantage, it's not like Trae's going to explode through Westbrook. But what Trae does have to counter that is a really awesome instinctual level of drawing fouls. He's been so good at that. He knows how to like swing through. He knows how to like jar his head back. He's really good at that. So I think that's how he counters that to some extent. But I agree with you. I think in certain matchups, in certain settings, he's not going to run through a big, he's not going to run through a wing type player at the rim. He's just not that kind of athletic build. He doesn't explode through people. He's going to have to rely on craft, the floater game, and then drawing fouls.
Another aspect of this that I think is important to note is that he's comfortable going both to his left and right. Like,
yes, teams
are not going to be able to just scout him and say, oh, he's always trying to get back to his right hand. Because of that ambidexterity that we talked about earlier, teams are going to have to play him to both sides of the floor, and that's going to make it an even bigger challenge in some respects. Like, De'Aaron Fox drives, I believe, right quite a bit, right? Despite being a lefty.
Yes.
And I don't really know the scouting report on Dennis Smith in the NBA anymore. Lonzo Ball, though, almost always drove right. Like, just full stop. Like, he would always drive right.
Yeah, and Dennis drives left. He loves driving left. So you kind of when you know what somebody's going to do and you can anticipate that. A lot of guys, weak guys in the NBA now, so force them to your weak hand. With Trae, he can still pull up going in that direction. He's very comfortable attacking that way. So he's not going to really be able to. That's not going to be a huge factor for him, like it is with Lonzo, where you want to force him to his right because you know he has to bring the ball back to his left to pull up. Trae he can do it from either way. So that's a huge benefit for him because that makes him not predictable.
So to the second point here, shooting off the dribble. I am not worried about Trae Young shooting off the dribble. He's one of the best shooters off the dribble that I think I've ever seen in my life. And just in terms of quick release, in terms of everything that you're talking about, he has an incredible, incredible capacity to shoot off of the dribble. I will say that we're going to combine another aspect of this into that part, because there is a weakness that he has that I am concerned about. I am worried about him being able to consistently finish at the rim. This year, Trae Young is in the 41st percentile nationally in finishing at the rim. He's finished 49.1% of his shots in the half court. And I am concerned. I just don't think he's physically strong enough to go up through contact. And I don't think he's physically capable of just beating longer defenders, basically.
And it's a valid concern. I think that's his biggest weakness offensively is his finishing capability, because you just can't profile him to have the frame and the strength level to absorb contact with these bigger rim protectors in the NBA level. Guys that have length, he can't go into somebody's body to deter them. That's a huge factor at the NBA level as far as running into bigs, taking away their leverage so they can't jump and kind of extend that length, because you can't really finish over those guys if you don't make contact with them. It's too difficult unless you have a floater game, which he does. So that would be my counter to the finishing around the rim, is that he has at least natural touch. He's got some freaky wizard touch on his floaters, man. It's he's made some ridiculous shots this year. I know you don't want to win. You don't want to live and die by the floater. I'm not advocating for that, but at least that gives him an avenue to where maybe if a big is in a slight drop back, he can give him like a ball fake or like a shot fake, and the big bites and jumps and he blows by him or something like that. There are avenues for him to finish, but it's going to be an uphill battle because he just does not have the tools. He doesn't have the length extension, all the stuff you look for from a finisher, the 1 foot pop he doesn't have. It's going to be an uphill battle, but I do think he at least has the natural touch on floaters to where he can have an avenue to finish around the rim.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that the floater game is going to be the key. It's just really hard to be efficient on floaters. You know what I mean? Like, if a guy is shooting 50% on floaters, that is an exorbitant number in the NBA. There are CJ McCollum shoots 50% on floaters. Like, CJ is really good. And is CJ the best floater guy in the NBA probably?
He's definitely up there.
But it's really, really hard to be efficient on floaters just due to the length involved in the NBA. You look at some of the guys, I mean, you're going against guys like Mohamed Bamba almost every night. I mean, Rudy Gobert and Mohamed Bamba might be, maybe outliers, but at the same token, okay, you're going against someone like Yusuf Nurkic every night, who is bigger than 99% of all college basketball players.
Yes.
So I'm looking at floaters right now in the entire NBA, and I'm sorting by effective field goal percentage. Among players who have taken 30 floaters this year, we'll say that's a decent number. There are exactly 13 players who are shooting over 50% right now on floaters.
That's not surprising. I mean, it's a difficult shot. I think you just have to view it through the lens of he has the floater touch. He has that ability. So maybe he can finish at different angles. So off balance runners, maybe some scoop shots. So there's avenues for him just because he has that touch element to where maybe he can expand it over time. He's going to have to win with craft. I think we can both agree on that. It's not going to be something he's going to run into guys and it's going to be like this explosive Trae Young. He's going to have trick shots in his bag. I just think that he at least has the foundation with his touch that a lot of guys don't have. So that's the one thing he has going for him as a finisher. But I agree with you. I think that you can't really view it overall it's a strength.
Right, and what scares me there is he derives so much value through his ability to draw fouls, right? I think teams are just, like, part of it is he's really good at embracing contact and creating that contact himself. I think teams will just start playing him more honest. Like, NBA defenders are, by nature, much better than college defenders. I think they're going to be capable of playing him without fouling at a better rate, at least, than Big 12 defenders are.
Totally agree. But I still think, watching just this lead guard class in 2017, a lot of them have problems drawing fouls. Like, they can get into the lane, they can get to the rim, but it's that last step when you can't finish over everybody in this league because you can't. It's, can you actually initiate contact? Can you swing through, draw a reaching foul to the rim? And I think Trae has those instincts. I just see he does things on the court like that continuously. Whenever he drives, he's looking to draw fouls. You can view it as, you know, he's relying on them too much, but I also think you can view it in a positive fashion that says he already has that instinctually built into his brain, whereas some of these other young guards really struggle there. So maybe that's another avenue that he can help compensate for his lack of finishing ability.
So we've talked about the passing ability extensively. I don't think we need to go further into that in, point number 3 here. Let's talk about the defense. He's certainly not a positive defender. Is there any chance you see for him to get to, like, the 40th percentile of defender among lead guards in the NBA? So, like, still slightly below average.
Yeah, if he can add some upper body strength, I think maybe in certain situations, if he shows the physicality and the toughness, he can battle better. He has fast hands. I've seen him engage as far as quickness. I always state, like, the last 28 minutes of the first Texas Tech game, that's the best I've seen him defend all year. And he can move laterally. It's just, there's so much noise with his defensive profile. It's really, really hard, first of all, to see him as a positive defender in the NBA. I think that we can probably rule that out with his size. It's not going to happen. It's just about how bad is he? Is it a degree of, like, is he Isaiah Thomas bad, or is he salvageable? Is he like a -1 defensive RPM kind of defensive type? Like, that's a huge difference between being really bad and being tolerable. So that's kind of the battle he's going to fight.
Okay, so is there any aspect of his game that we haven't talked about so far that you want to kind of bring up here?
I mean, I want to ask you quickly about the shot selection. We got to get back into defense, just profiling a little bit more intricately, but his shot selection, this is something that's been a divisive topic throughout the year. We know his past as far as having the green light at high school levels, has the green light at Oklahoma. The argument I've kind of made is, like, Jason Tatum had shot selections too, shot selection issues as well. Even in summer league, guys were freaking out like, oh, he's going to be able to play like that. And no, like, no NBA coach is going to let Trae do what Trae does in college. He's not going to be able to shoot 30-footers every time down the floor. So how big of an issue do you really think that is? Because it comes back to me, Trae is so smart in so many capacities of the game. I think he'll figure it out. He's going to be coachable. Do you disagree with that?
It's always hard for me with guys that have always had shot selection issues. And it's particularly hard for me for lead ball handlers who have always had shot selection issues, right? Like, Jason Tatum just isn't going to have the ball in his hands enough. Even if he has those shot selection issues, like in the future in the NBA, he's just not going to have the ball in his hands enough to create a significant negative impact. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Trae Young can do significant damage to a team if he doesn't fix his shot selection issues. I do think that as he gets into an NBA situation, he certainly seems to be emotionally intelligent enough to where he will recognize the talent around him. We have seen his passing ability. We've talked extensively about his passing ability to the point where I believe that he will be okay. Just, I think that he'll take poor shots, but if he excises the worst 10% of his bad shots, he's still fine. You know what I mean? He doesn't have to not take any bad shots. He just needs to avoid the miserable guy right in his grill, 27 feet away from the basket shots, you know?
Absolutely. And I just can't get over the fact he's so smart.
Yeah.
It's small. That's what I think too. I mean, he's going to take some bad looks because most lead guards have shot selection problems. I mean, his is a little bit more expanded and notable because of the role he plays. I just can't get over the fact that this guy's so smart and he seems self-aware. Like, when I've seen him talk, he seems self-aware. His family seems self-aware. And it's just tough for me to think this guy is going to be bothered by this his entire career. It's not like he's a stupid player. It's not like he's a low intelligence player that, doesn't really know what a good shot is. I think he does. I think he has great feel for the game. It's just a lot of noise again with the situation. It's one of the more difficult situations I've seen as far as analyzing a guy, because he doesn't have any secondary creation around him. Teams are literally gearing up to take him away. Like Texas Tech in that second game, it wasn't even like a real trap. It was like, we're going to double you at half court.
Yes.
And you aren't going to do anything in the rest of this game because we're going to take the ball away from you. And nobody else can really dribble outside of like maybe straight line situations. And I think a lot of elements that you pointed out in the past with Oklahoma's system, as far as the coach, as far as the surrounding spacing at times, some guys who can finish lobs, it's not the worst setting with how he's supposed to play. But
hold on. I want to get to that in a second, because I want to have like a whole section on context with Trae Young, because context is just fucking impossible with him. Let's talk about the defense real quick. Where he struggles for me is at the point of attack. He's just not strong enough to bother anyone. Like, full stop. Like, that's the biggest issue for me. He cannot bother anyone at the point of attack because he's not long enough, not strong enough. And, like, I'll be honest, like, I understand why you would say he's quick. He does have relative quickness, but when you combine the quickness with the lack of length, it's a below average amount. You know what I mean?
Oh, 100%. And the lack of strength. I mean, he's not going to be able to absorb contact. If he's containing a bigger lead guard in space, he's going to get knocked off his spots. That's so much of this is like he's going to get headhunted and pick and roll on switches. Right. Can he absorb contact there? No. He's too small. Right.
He needs to get stronger. He needs to get significantly stronger. And, he's a hard worker, and you have to hope that he will do that. But his frame is a little bit scary from that regard. Like, Damian Lillard was skinny. Like, he was skinny at Weber State when he first got there. He also had broad shoulders and the frame with which that should be able to handle a lot of contact, that should be able to handle a lot of strength and weight addition. Having said, I don't know that I see that with Trae's frame. Trae kind of has skinny shoulders, skinny hips, not really the same kind of build,
I think it's going to be core strength, honestly. Maybe he can add a little bit of girth, but just more core strength to absorb contact. Just a little bit would help him. Like any kind of increments that he improves strength-wise, because that's really the only way he can really improve. He's not going to get longer. He's not going to get taller. So he has to get more physical, and a lot of that goes down to just a general approach. I mean, that's his biggest defensive weakness right now. I mean, the Kansas game was fucking absurd, man.
Yeah, and, I think that with Trae, like, we have an example in Stephen Curry. Stephen Curry was a string bean when he got to the NBA. Steph is now, like, a strong dude. Like, you look at Stephen Curry, like, yeah, he's not, like, overly built by NBA standards. But, like, you saw that dude on the street, you would no longer be saying, oh, that's a normal dude,
And his physical and toughness and mental toughness. Like, he'll battle guys on switches. That's one of the most underrated things about the finals and, like, higher levels of play is that dude will battle you. Even if you're like a 6'8" wing, he'll fight you. And that's important. I mean, that's how Chris Paul wins too. I mean, Chris Paul's a different kind of cat as far as defense goes, but those guys just play with a certain mental toughness edge that gives them an advantage. And Trae can replicate that. He just hasn't really obviously done that in college.
Right. In Trae Young, we have not seen that. I don't even know that I want to call it desire yet, because he has so much on his plate offensively that it is so difficult for him, I think, to expend any energy defensively. Also, he cannot ever get into foul trouble or else Oklahoma falls off a cliff. So, like, I think it's a complicated issue when it comes to Trae Young's defense, but I am a little bit concerned about his lack of fight defensively.
I'm also concerned about the Kansas game as far as the intelligence, ducking under on screens against Devontae Graham. Like, what the hell are you doing? Like, that's just inexcusable. I get the apathy, and he can't exert full energy on that end because he has to run the show offensively. I totally get that. I mean, some of the lazy, crazy Ivan switches that he does, well, he'll just, like, point at a teammate to switch, and, like, they don't even see him some of the time. He'll just kind of call shots on the move, and you're like, what are you doing, man? Just stick with your guy. I get some of the apathy in that approach, but when you start mixing in the lack of mental decision-making, that's something he cannot afford. Like, we're talking about a guy who's already working from, behind the vantage point that you'd like. He's already behind the wheel here. It's tough to compensate for a lack of tools, size, all of that stuff if you're making stupid plays. So that's that's the part that stuck out to me about Kansas game is just he can't afford those kinds of decisions.
Right. And, here's the other deal, too. Like, Oklahoma this year has been 7 points per 100 possessions better when he's on the bench defensively. He's had like 300 possessions on the bench defensively, so it's not a crazy large sample size or anything. But that's not an insignificant amount. Like, they have been much better defensively when he's been on the bench this year, and that kind of scares me a little bit. And that comes with the fact that, like, Kadeem Latin is a pretty good defender. Rashard Odoms is a good defender. Christian James has been in that system for a while and is athletic. Like, Manek isn't a great defender, but this team does have athletic players who should be able to help cover for him. And I think they actually do a relatively decent job of covering for him sometimes, but it's hard, I think, in a lot of ways. It's very, very hard. And that's not to even consider the fact that in general, his presence on the floor is just going to create more transition opportunities for the opposing team, because you're going to see longer 3-point misses. You're going to see more turnovers offensively when he's on the floor. There's just kind of no doubt about that, Yeah,
it's a great point. I just think it comes down to his defense overall. It's tough to project it in any kind of positive fashion. It just comes back to how bad is it going to be? Can it be tolerable? There's a lot of NBA league guards that don't play defense. Damian Lillard doesn't really play defense still this year. He's been pretty solid this year, but there's a lot of guys defensively that just don't do it, especially in the regular season. Just for him, he has to be at least salvageable. If he's a complete negative, that's just hard to fit in a winning construct.
Right. So let's move on to context here, because I do think that is a very, very important aspect of what we've seen from him so far. On the one hand, Trae Young plays with no other future NBA players, in my opinion. I would be pretty surprised if any of those guys got to the NBA, and that's not a disparagement on them necessarily. I think it's just kind of a fact of the matter. He plays with guys that help him space the floor, and he plays with solid rim runners in Kadeem Latin and Jamuni McNeese, but he doesn't play with anyone who is an overwhelming talent. Do you think that's fair?
That's absolutely fair.
On the other hand, and I think that significantly hinders his game, just full stop. But
yes,
on the other hand, he plays in a scheme with Lon Kruger coaching the ball. I mean, he's done a great job scheming with Trae Young on the floor, where they're essentially running spread pick and roll in a way that is pretty applicable to an NBA scheme. Like, they full stop know how to space the floor and understand how to get him in the right positions and how to get the ball in the right positions. There aren't enough offensive coaches in college basketball that understand how to do that. And I think that when you're translating his stats to the NBA, you have to account for the fact that it's kind of like having a steroid, right? Like, spacing is kind of like a drug, right?
Yeah.
And actually having the floor properly spaced certainly inflates his stats if you're going off of some sort of statistical system.
Absolutely. I mean, you have to start there as far as factoring this into the analysis. Everybody wants to point to, the deficiencies with the surrounding cast, which has a ton of merit. I mean, have you ever seen somebody that has to create with this kind of burden at the college level? Like, the only guy I can remember in the pros is even LeBron, and LeBron's just not a real person. So in college, I don't know, who's been tasked with this kind of creation burden for basically himself and for anybody else? It's bizarre.
I mean, Jimmer certainly had a large burden on his shoulders when he was at BYU. I mean, Trae is at 39% of his team's possessions right now. That's a lot.
That is ridiculous.
Yeah, I'm going through, man. I'm not seeing anyone that's even near that. The highest I've seen is 37. Jimmer was at 36 his senior year, for reference. Evan Turner was at 34.7 his junior year, where he won National Player of the Year at Ohio State. Steph was at 38. So what we're seeing from Trae Young is totally bananas. It's 100% bananas, and it's necessary because they don't have the supporting cast. Even Stephen Curry let's say the 2008 year where they made the big run in the NCAA tournament. He still had Jason Richards, who was a longtime professional point guard, one of the best assist men in the entire country. He had Andrew Lovedale, who was a consistent player in the post for them. They had some actual pieces around Steph that helped Steph make Steph on that level, at least. It's hard for me to say that Oklahoma has commensurate talent with the teams they play in the Big 12.
And Steph played off the ball a lot. That's the thing, is
exactly.
He could run off screens, and Trae doesn't get that opportunity. Like he does it in flashes, but when he doesn't have the ball, nobody else can really play make. So that's what makes it so much more difficult for him. It's not like he can take possessions off and like run off a screen or spot up in the corner. He has the ball basically all the time. He's in self-creation situations. Like he's number 2 in the NCAA right now, Division I in isolation possessions, behind somebody named McKnight Martavius from Arkansas Pine Bluff. So that is kind of what we're dealing with here. He's 135 isolation possessions this season, which is bonkers. I mean, that is a ridiculously high level of creation burden. He went to Oklahoma probably to have this kind of freedom, but this is just a ridiculous usage rate.
Yeah, he went to Oklahoma to have this kind of freedom. It's too much freedom, probably, in some ways.
A little bit too much.
Little bit too much. So, in that context, do you just kind of call it a wash, or do you say that, the system helps him more than the NBA talent that is not surrounding him? Like, how do you go about trying to value that?
I think I look more to the surrounding talent, because in the NBA, obviously his surrounding cast is going to be significantly better, to where he doesn't have to initiate the offense every single possession. You could run an emotion type scheme where you're running off ball. You don't have to really do spread pick and roll every time, deal with these, traps and whatnot, and just really fatigue yourself. It's playing on the ball is really tough, especially when you're going against like a West Virginia who's just pressing the hell out of you, and nobody else can really handle the creation burden as far as, setting up teammates. So I lean more towards just his usage rate and his responsibility level. It's just ridiculous. Even if it is a well-spaced floor, it's not like there is anybody taking off the burden just for a little bit in games. Honestly, he can't sit because the offense flounders, and you can't play off the ball because the offense flounders. So I lean more towards, I don't know if it's been a negative, because look at how we're talking about him now, right? I mean,
right.
He wasn't even in the top 20 prospect list, and now he's, in your top 7, he's in my top 3. So did he make the right choice by going to Oklahoma? I think absolutely.
For sure.
Yeah. But I think if we're projecting him to the next level, it's just really dicey, because there's so much noise in his profile. Like, how much is fatigue? How much is scheme? All of this stuff. And these are crucial ingredients as far as projecting him to the next level.
Okay. So I want to just throw a few numbers at you in terms of what he has done. He has 400 combined assists and turnovers this year. He has taken 529 shots. He has taken 247 free throws. He has literally accounted for 1,200 possessions this year for Oklahoma. He has taken so many shots. He has taken over 750 shots this year when you add in the amount of times that he has had to lift the ball above his head at the foul line and put it in a forward motion toward the basket. You throw in the 400 assists and turnovers, and it's just insane. Like, you wonder why a guy would be tired out. That's why. I do think it's worth pointing out, though, that like his frame probably can't handle that right now, and his frame probably can't handle the rigors of the NBA right now. He needs to get stronger. He needs to get more energy.
I'm really glad you pointed that out. I think that's a key takeaway here. Is we talk about guys with physical tools. This is the importance of it. Is you can last the longevity of the season, like a Russell Westbrook. That dude is a cyborg, so it's a kind of an outlier scenario. But that guy can play 82 games in the regular season, and go attack the rim relentlessly. He has the frame to kind of absorb all that. Just Trae right now, probably not. No. So that's what makes it also. I think that's a strike against him. I mean, that's what we talk about with the tools, and I think that is a valid criticism of his. Yeah,
and I have now spent the time, like, kind of. I don't want to say like I've shit on him, because I think I've been pretty fair. Right?
Yeah.
So, he is still such an incredible prospect. Like, he has the potential to totally change like basketball in a lot of ways. Like he is he has potential at the highest level to be something like what Stephen Curry is. He probably won't reach Stephen Curry's level because, well, Steph is probably the best shooter ever. But like he can be a player of that ilk, I think, if he continues to make strides to improve his game. The fact that he's 19 years old and doing this is insane. Like, it's totally remarkable. You know what I mean? There's no circumstance where someone who is this young should be able to do this.
Yeah, it's just, I look at him and I see special traits. I see special instincts and intelligence for a point guard his age. Just, I think he is kind of like a borderline generational type passer. I always go back to that, but some of the stuff I see from him, I didn't see from any of the point guards last year, including Lonzo. If you want to incorporate decision making, I think that's a very valid argument, especially distinguishing with someone like Lonzo, who is just a relentlessly good decision maker.
Yeah, actually, we haven't talked about the turnovers a whole lot yet.
Let's do it.
There have been all of these studies in the past that show that being willing to try and make plays as a younger player kind of portends to future success, right? Even if you turn the ball over, that's okay. Just go out there and be willing to kind of go for it. I do think that there is a line when it comes to that, right? And I think that he often flouts that line and crosses it.
Yeah, it's just, I like to look at turnovers and like, what kind of turnovers are they? Are you trying to make like an all-star play? Are you not reading the defense? That's the number one thing. If you're not reading a defense, if you're a primary ball handler, that's when the red flags go up. But even in the Kansas game, like he was trying to anticipate, I think, too much. Like he was just going into the lane and doing these wraparound passes that weren't even there, because I think he was anticipating sometimes his teammates would cut to the rim, they didn't, and sometimes he was just throwing it into traffic. So it's like he can definitely cut down on those. I mean, I just come back to this guy's so freaking smart. I think he'll figure it out with less usage and like more surrounding talent and better spacing and better passing angles. I mean, we're talking about 6'2". He's not going to be able to pass through all of these arms in a compact kind of setting. So it's so tough because I don't look at him and say he can't read a defense. I absolutely think he can read a defense, but he needs to reel it in.
Yeah, I think that that's the key. Like, how much of this is him being overly aggressive? How much of it is, as he's gone up against more length, he hasn't been able to see over the defense as much? You know what I mean? Like, that amount of length and that amount of height that he is playing in, the Big 12 now is very different from when he was playing in the non-conference season. And I'm a little bit worried that he needs to just chill a little bit. I think is the best way to put it. He needs to just chill out, man. Like, some of the stuff he does, it's just like, you don't need to do that. You don't need to. There's no reason to.
I think that's well summed up. I mean, I can't put it any better than that. Just chill the fuck out at certain times. But yeah, I don't know, man. It's just so tough projecting someone like this, because I do feel like, again, the instincts are there. And if he just would dial back some of the, he's definitely pressing now. I mean, we can agree on that. Like,
I think so.
A lot of times, like, he's driving and he's really pressing the issue that I didn't see him do earlier this year. Maybe that's fatigue. Maybe that's the length. Him being more disrupted. I don't know what it is, but it's clearly manifested on the court as far as that goes.
Yeah, no, I agree. I guess that the last part of this conversation just shifts to, how do you evaluate this package of skills? Like, how do we go about trying to, like, put all of this into context? Because what scares me in a lot of ways with Trae are the skills that have potential to make him just an absolute all-star, right? Like, I've noted my worries about shot selection, my worries about the ability to get separation, the defense, like the ability to finish at the rim. Like, I've noted a lot of these. I think these can all be strengths for him if he continues to improve. But the problem with all of this is that the margin for error for a guy like Trae Young is incredibly small. Like, it's not minuscule. Like, he can still be what he is right now and probably be like Shabazz Napier, or like a little bit better Shabazz Napier because he's a better passer. But like, in terms of using a top 7 pick on him, the margin for error is very small.
Yeah, he doesn't have, those freakish tools to fall back on, or the athleticism for sure. And I mean, his worst case is probably a really, really good backup point guard. I don't know how he isn't that with his ability to shoot, score, pass in like the modern game. I think that that's like his floor. His ceiling, you kind of have to ignore a lot of historical precedent when it comes to smaller guards. I mean, you get a lot of Trey Burks, those kind of guys. It's like I just think that Trae is so much more advanced in other elements of the game. Like, he's not just your run-of-the-mill guard who shoots pretty well.
Right.
He has advanced instincts. So that's what I'm banking on, but I totally agree with you. I mean, we're talking about a guy who can be a backup point guard or a guy who can be like the second coming of Steve Nash light or something like that. That's the kind of variance we're talking about. And I think that's probably a fair assessment of his overall as addressing floor and ceiling.
Yeah, that's what scares me in a lot of ways because, this is something I talked about with Zach Harper last week on the podcast was, the difference between Stephen Curry and Damian Lillard is probably 7% of 3-point percentage, right? Like if Damian Lillard was a 45% 3-point shooter, he would probably be something like Steph Curry, right?
Pretty much. Yeah. I think Steph's probably still a little bit better a passer, but I get exactly where you're going at.
The difference between Damian Lillard and Lou Williams, who up until this year was largely a backup sixth man guard, is probably 3% of, being able to knock down shots, like 3% of 3-point range, going from 38% to 35%.
Yeah, I think that, and just Lillard can still pass well enough to initiate your offense. I think that's always been Lou's issue is like he can score, but he's not going to really facilitate for your team at a high level. But as far as shooting, absolutely.
Right. I mean, like as a scorer, right? So
yes,
that's how quick the margin for error goes down as a scorer. Now, Trae's ability to pass is going to make him, someone who I think is going to be valuable no matter what at the next level. I think that just shows, though, how scary this can be for a team drafting in the top 7. I think Trae Young is going to get a general manager fired. I don't know if it's going to be the guy who takes him or the guy who passed on him, but I think he's going to get a general manager fired.
I mean, that's fair. And I think it goes back to me to his value as a primary initiator at this level, as far as his ability to shoot off the dribble, his passing, how much value can he bring on a good team? A ton of value. As far as that position and that role, we know that has value. That's where the best offensive players in the league usually subside, is those initiators, unless you're like a wing guy like Kawhi or Durant who can just shoot the hell out of the ball off the dribble. Like, that's where the offensive value in the league is derived from. And I look at this draft and I see 2 of those guys. And that is kind of what you have to bank on sometimes, is those guys maturing and coming into the players that you think they can be, even if they are risky, because they can also play off the ball. And that's something that's crucial. It's not just somebody who you're throwing the ball to and he has to have the ball. Like, Trae can play off the ball, I think, a lot better than he's shown at Oklahoma because he hasn't gotten the chance to. So I look at guys assessing, first of all, what they are. My second step is how valuable are they? The third is what teams can really optimize them. And I look at the second step, and you see clear avenues to legitimate value with Trae with some downside. I do think he's an NBA player, and you don't always get that certainty when you draft him in the top 10. Honestly, there's maybe some more variance than that. And I think he can be an impactful, at least rotation player. But I get your concerns. I mean, historically speaking, for smaller guards, it's a very low margin for error.
Okay, so let's just run through all of the lottery teams. Phoenix. Do you like the fit with Phoenix next to Devin Booker?
I mean, offensively, sure. Defensively, it captures ceiling kind of like Portland's is with CJ and Dame. So if he's a value pick where they select, that's fine. But in a short answer, I mean, it does cap your defensive ceiling. Yeah,
like I would probably be willing to take him at 5 or 6 if I was Phoenix. I probably would not take him ahead of any of the big guys if I was Phoenix.
Fair.
Maybe Muhammad Bamba, but that's a different can of worms. Atlanta, would you trade Dennis Schroeder to take Trae Young?
Oh, yeah. I don't think they even value Dennis Schroeder that highly. I think they're in a situation where they don't have a primary guy. So that's a kind of team that they have no real primary creator equity. So definitely take Trae.
But where would you take him? Like, would you take him over DeAndre Ayton? Would you take him over Jaren Jackson? Like, where do you kind of hit the cutoff with Atlanta?
I have Jaren slightly ahead right now. So, I mean, on my board, I would take him still ahead of Ayton. I could see arguments for Atlanta is kind of like a clean slate. They have John Collins who's been really effective for them this year, but I don't look at John Collins as any kind of like franchise level player. I think he's going to be really solid. So they can take like the highest upside guy with a reasonable floor to value, and that's kind of how I view guys. So Trae for sure. I mean, maybe 3. Maybe I prefer Jaren for them, but at the same time, I prefer Jaren more for a team that already has a primary creator type. I think that if you have a blank slate, then you can make a stronger argument for Trae there.
Dallas at number 3 is a really interesting one because they already have Dennis Smith.
Yeah, they love to play multiple point guards. I mean, that's Carlisle's thing, is like their backup unit is 3 point guards, but I still wouldn't do that. I mean, you can't really get away with that, I don't think, in the playoffs when teams really scheme and they have the size advantage. So that's kind of cutting the head off the snake there.
Yeah, like they can do better by taking Michael Porter or by taking whoever you want, really, I think. Orlando.
I mean, this is where everybody wants them to go. I mean, I shouldn't say everybody wants them, but this is the clear fit, right? Because they need shooting so bad. They need somebody to handle the ball. God, I don't know. That's all I got.
Would you take him number 1 if you were Orlando?
No, I'd take Luka. I think I'd still trust Luka in a primary creator role. And you could have some really interesting, versatile size with him, Aaron Gordon, if you keep him, and then Isaac. That would be really interesting. I think that Luka's a tier ahead of everybody else. So I'm going to say Luka for basically everybody.
Yeah, like I would probably take Trae 3 if I was Orlando.
Okay.
I think I would. Like he just fits a need, and he makes a lot of sense for them. I think he makes a lot of sense for what they've needed over the last half decade.
Sure.
Sacramento, who has taken De'Aaron Fox just a year ago.
Yeah, that's another no-fly zone. I mean, you can't really play De'Aaron. I mean, I know he's played some 2-guard this year, but you don't really want him that much off the ball. I think he kind of has to initiate your offense and get to the rim, use his quickness. So I would take Trae if he's there at 6 or 7, like where you have him on your board. But in like the top 5, I don't think so.
Memphis at number 6 with Mike Conley.
Oh boy. It depends on who else is on the board at that point. I mean, Memphis is such a weird situation. Like, of course, like Bagley would be great there. He's probably not going to be there at 6. I would consider if he's the best player on my board at 6, even with Mike Conley, because let's face it, Memphis's current core has kind of run its course. I mean, they're probably going to realize that soon enough. So I think that's a fine pick. But is that the best developmental situation for Trae? Who knows? So
like if you're Memphis, I don't take him over Ayton, Doncic, Bagley, Jackson, Bamba, Porter. You probably take him over everyone else, though. Like, you still probably take him if he's at 7, right?
I would personally, but I could see the Grizzlies, if they want to win now, taking someone like, I don't know if Mikal goes that high, but he could definitely help them more in short term. Yeah.
Cleveland overall.
That's really tantalizing because he can clearly play off LeBron, and he also gives you security if LeBron leaves. Yeah. So if he's there at their pick, I think that'd be actually kind of a fascinating investment for them.
Yeah, like if I was Cleveland, I would probably take Ayton. I would probably take Doncic. It gets tricky for me. Even as someone who like thinks Marvin Bagley's probably a tier ahead of him as a prospect, if Trae Young helps LeBron James stay, that gets real tough.
Oh, that's a good point, too. I didn't even think about that. I forgot he had mentioned him. So, yeah, if he's on LeBron's radar, you got to do that.
Chicago at number 8, so Chicago anywhere in the lottery. I love this fit, actually.
Really interesting with Chris Dunn as far as Chris. I'm guessing you're probably getting in Chris, be able to defend a point of attack, be a little bit more of a versatile defensive player, even though Trae's going to have problems guarding 2 guards. But I think they have the kind of system where I trust Hoiberg to like optimize guys. Like he's done a great job with Lowry this year. I think he can do a good job with Trae Young there.
I love that fit. That might be like where I want him to go, as long as Hoiberg is there, which is hilarious to say. Like, you know, NBA fans a year ago would have like shot you if you would have said that.
It's crazy. The about face is ridiculous on Hoiberg. Like even me, like in the offseason, I was like, I'm lukewarm on him. And watching like the little I have of the Bulls this year, I'm like, I love Hoiberg.
He's good. He's a good coach.
Yeah. He is.
New York. Yeah, I think so. Right. The fits with Frankie Smokes.
Hell yeah. I love that fit. I mean, I view Frank is more of a two guard. I think he's a wing ideally, and I think the Knicks might think that too with how they're handling the Moutier situation. You get a Trae Young, Kristaps pick and roll that gets real interesting.
Philadelphia, I think, should take him at number 2. I think that they are the one team in this thing where I would say I would take him number 2.
Wow, that's not far fetched. Honestly, how are you factoring Fultz into this analysis? You can still play both of them in the backcourt. It's fine. Or are you viewing this as more of a pessimistic? Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, like, I mean, your defense is going to be a disaster. But if you have Simmons, Covington, and Embiid on the floor with them, they might be okay.
Oh, they'll still be good. I mean, they put those big 3 on the court. You're not going to be able to do a ton. I agree. Maybe Fultz is respectable as a defensive player. I mean, he has certainly the tools, doesn't really have the high instincts there, but that's really fascinating because Trae just gives them a totally different animal as a shooter off the ball.
Yeah, like that is a terrifying package of skills to me. You can have 3 different guys bring the ball up the floor and initiate your offense like in a substantial way. 2 of who could pull up from 3 at any point, 1 of whom who could pull up from 3 at 30 feet. That is terrifying to me. And they have the defensive pieces to insulate him. To me, that is the fit. Like, I would still take Doncic ahead because if you get Luka Doncic, it's very, very easy to envision a scenario where the Sixers can run out 5 players who are 6'8" or taller and can retain both offensive and defensive equity. But, I mean, Trae Young there would be perfect, I think.
I totally agree.
Charlotte is still, at 24 wins right now. Do we like that? What do we think with Kemba Walker and Malik Monk there?
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing is, where are they going moving forward? Are they going to trade Kemba? Him and Monk as a defensive backcourt is a hellfire storm defensively. Like, there's just no way they're going to guard anybody, but they'd be really, really fun offensively. And if that's kind of what they're going for, is to be like an entertaining team for the first time in a long time, like, that would be a super fun backcourt.
Speaking of Charlotte, I think it's probably interesting to note like that they're going to have a new regime essentially. Rich Cho is leaving the organization or has left the organization. I think he is done. I think effective immediately. A lot of interesting rumors going around about like that Mitch Kupchak is going to get a call about that job. That Buzz Peterson is going to play a significant role in the hierarchy now. For those who don't know, Buzz Peterson is an assistant general manager there now. He's also Michael Jordan's former roommate at North Carolina. Mitch Kupchak is a former North Carolina legend. Very, wonder how that came about.
Yeah, man. I'm actually kind of a Mitch Kupchak fan. Honestly, I think he did an underrated job with the Lakers. I mean, who knows? I never know how to evaluate general managers because you never know how much of it is owner influenced. Owners run the league for sure. Like, every franchise has to answer to their owner. So you don't know, like the Mozgov deal and the Dang deal, those were horrible. But I think Kupchak did a solid job in the draft. I mean, he has an awesome reputation around the league as far as guys that they like to interact with him and stuff. They like to do deals with him. So I think it's a solid move. I mean, it sucks for Cho. I think that Cho is actually a pretty damn good GM too. And some of the reports have trickled out like he's against some of the moves, like the cap killing moves that the Hornets made. So who knows what his responsibilities were. But I think it's an interesting move for them. Yeah,
I mean, you talk to folks around the league, and it was it's been said to me a couple times that Rich Cho was kind of against some of those moves to like tie up their cap sheet long term. Is what it is, I guess. Sometimes MJ just got to get his guys in there and kind of go from there. But Rich Cho will find another job pretty easily. I think he's a very, very smart human being. He is a good NBA basketball executive. The last team here will be the Clippers we're going to talk about because the Clippers have potentially 2 picks. So do we like the Clippers for Trae Young? Yeah, right?
Yeah, I don't see a reason. They're another team with kind of a blank slate moving forward. I mean, they have Tobias, who's under contract for 2 years or 1 extra year, and they don't really have any core pieces. So, you move on from Chris Paul. You acquire Patrick Beverley, who's not really like a pure point guard. He has to be played with like a wing initiator type. They have Jawan Evans, who we both really like. I'm not sure if you draft around Jawan Evans for as much as we like him. So that's an interesting fit too.
Jawan Evans, future NBA superstar. Yeah, I think that's about all I got on Trae Young. Like, I'm still pretty comfortable with him at like 7 or so on my board, like 6 or 7, having done this deep dive. Probably 7, to be honest. I don't like, there are situations I would take him over Mohamed Bamba. There are situations I would take Bamba over him. I think I will say, like I said, that Colin Sexton and him are kind of a tier to themselves. After talking this through, I think I am more on the side of Trae is definitely someone who I would rather have, but it's hard for me to get him above like 6, I think, right now.
I think that's fair. Honestly, I'm sticking with him in the top 5. I have him 3. I just see special traits. Again, I think there's 3 guys in this class that really know how to play the game. Luka, Trae, and then defensively Jaren Jackson. Then you have the freakish tools guys. You have the freakish tools guys that, could make me look horrible. Ayton, of course, runs the court, his movement skills, or David Robbins going to ask. You have the rim protection issues, the diagnosing of plays, Bamba, of course, with the length, Bagley with the athleticism. So I get having those guys ahead. I think that the athleticism paradigm that they have is safer, and especially in a lot of executives' eyes. I mean, you look at the tools, you look at the, just the general freakish athleticism for all of those guys. It's easy to take that over someone who's a 6'2" guard that, might have a lower floor. But I'm sticking with Trae. He keeps passing the eye test for me, even with these struggles as far as his efficiency and his statistics. I just view his game, watching him play, and I've watched probably like 15 games of his this year. I think he can be a special player.
Yeah, and I think that's totally fair. His ceiling is that. His ceiling is all NBA level player. I am someone who you value ceiling more than I do, and I value floor more than you do. I think that is pretty much the difference between the two of us as evaluators, right?
Pretty much, yeah. I think I value floor when it comes to what I know is valuable in the league. So an initiator, I'll take an extra gamble on, or like an anchor like Jaren Jackson. I'll invest more in someone with a floor like that, but maybe a little bit riskier, whereas you prefer like the general maybe athleticism floor above me.
Speaking of Jaren Jackson, we should probably take a second.
Let's go.
Jaren Jackson. You and I talked about Jaren, however long ago, a little while ago. He got like a little 15-minute section on the podcast. I mean, he's really good.
Oh, we got to give him a full hour at some point, dude. He's an evolving organism, man. You see him every game, and it seems to add something, like that crossover against Illinois through the legs. We've talked about that before. And then that one, I can't remember what game it was. We started exhibiting passing. He was like passing on the move. It was just crazy. So every game you see something. I know everybody's pointing to that left-hand dunk he had yesterday. He's phenomenal, man.
So here's what I will say about the Illinois game, because I watched that game. It was fine. We went a little crazy, I think, online, myself included. We were very excited about Jaren Jackson having that insane play against Illinois. I've had him at number 4 on my board for 3 or 4 weeks right now. He's an awesome basketball player. We need to chill out whenever he has 8 points, 4 rebounds, and 5 blocks in a game. And the reason he only plays 18 minutes is because he gets into significant foul trouble. I'm not saying he's not awesome, because he's absolutely incredible. But just chill out a little bit.
I'm probably not helping the cause, because I will not chill out. No, I agree. I mean, you got to keep it in context.
Every game was awful against Purdue. He was really bad.
Yeah. I watched that game too. He definitely did not. He's definitely had his lumps this year. I mean, he's not he's perfect in every game. The fouling issues for sure have been there, and I don't know, man. I just can't quit the instincts. I'm an instincts guy, man. The reactive athleticism, protecting the rim. That dude just plays super hard. Even in the games, what game was he in where it was a 2-point game down the stretch? Him and Miles Bridges were out, and he was still going nuts on the bench. He's always engaged. I just love that kid. I just believe in him overall as a player, and on the court, I mean, we know what he can bring as far as defensive value.
No, I totally agree with you. I have him at number 4 on my board. I'm just let's maybe just take a step back. That's all I'm saying.
Oh, last night on Twitter was fun because I didn't see that game, and all of a sudden everybody's blowing up about that play. I was like, yeah, that's pretty good.
Well, yeah, that's the other thing. He's done these plays throughout the year. He's the ultimate flashes guy on offense. You know what I mean? Everything he does on offense when he makes a play is spectacular. Yeah, but he also makes a really significant amount of shitty plays. His turnover rate right now is still 21.4. Just relax a little bit, I think, guys.
Yeah, or don't. But what I like from him, honestly, is getting to the turnovers really quick. Is that he's improved those over the year. That one game where he was passing on the move. Early in the season, that would have been a charge. And he's just improving at a rapid rate. His physique, his body from senior year of high school. I watched his high school tape, and he looked kind of plodding at times. He just looks like a completely different guy. And he's getting better. And we talk about upward trajectory. He's kind of the guy for me that personifies that.
Does it worry you at all? And this will be the last point that we're going to talk about with Jaren Jackson, because you brought up the turnovers, and I really think that's a great point. He's had more than one turnover in a game only once since January 26th, which is awesome. Does it worry you at all? I don't think he is a particularly quick first jumper. He does have the quick second jump once he like gets moving, but like he has a bunch of blocks where like he doesn't jump at all, and like he still blocks the shot, but he has these weird plays where he doesn't get up off the ground sometimes until like a split second later. Does that worry you at all?
His leaping ability, I think, is a little overrated. You see the highlight dunks that he does. I don't think he's a great leaper by any means, but I do think he reacts quickly. And that's something that I value over even leaping. A guy that can anticipate, and he's already rotating, and he can just, his reflex is always to overhelp and kind of immediately diagnose the play and rotate. So I would take that package over a guy that can just, second jump. Like Bagley is a generational second jumper, of course, so that's not really a good comparison. But I think even Jaren's second jump isn't the greatest. I mean, Bamba's isn't either. I think Bamba combines that sometimes with the inability to react quickly. So it's a valid criticism.
Yeah, like, and you know what? I actually think Jaren's second jump is better than his first jump marginally. You know what I mean? It's like once he gets moving, it's good. It's just that like he needs to get moving a little bit. And I do like the fact that laterally he's incredible. He has really active feet. He always keeps his feet moving. He always keeps his hands moving. But yeah, that's where I'm at. I'm not over the Jaren Jackson hype. I think the Jaren Jackson hype is very, very valid. Just, when he has 8 points and 4 rebounds and 5 blocks, let's just relax a little bit.
He's also probably going to have to get a restraining order against me eventually. So we'll see how that process
unfolds.
Undergoes there.
It's fair. It's a fair point. Cole, tell the people where they can find your work. You wrote something interesting today on wings and their shot diversity, so please go on ahead and plug that.
Sure. Just a comprehensive article looking at the 3-and-D wing archetype and how important shot diversity is to the modern game, using guys like Paul George, Chris Middleton, walking through their off-screen shooting, their ability to shoot off the dribble, what takeaways we can derive from that, and then applying it to Mikal Bridges and kind of his development this year, which Sam and I have talked about on the podcast, as far as his off movement shooting, a little bit off the dribble, and just how that kind of changes his ceiling outcome. Maybe not he's going to be a Paul George type, but at least that enters the calculus as far as his higher end outcomes. So I just think that's important because a lot of times he's pigeonholed into this straight 3-and-D guy. I think the upside might be a little higher than he's getting credit for. So check that out on the Stepien. As always, check out the Ododen NBA Draft Podcast with Sean Darenthal. I think Wendell Carter, the breakdown is going to go up later this week. And as always, continue to tune into this podcast.
Cole, thanks for coming on. You can subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, Android, whatever podcasting app you use. We're certainly up there now. What else is going on? The Athletic, go subscribe there. Keep me employed over there. I'd really appreciate it. I think that's about all I got for you. I went on Zach Harper's podcast earlier today, which is Wednesday. Go follow the Talk Hoops podcast. We talked a little bit about the Dallas Mavericks thing at the top, and then moved on into some other NBA draft stuff. So that's about all I got for you. Until next time, we'll talk soon. Bye.